Thanks for joining us on CBS News. I'm Lana Zach.
And I'm Errol Barnett. At this moment, a federal grand jury is back in a D.C. courthouse to hear evidence against former President Donald Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
Trump's lawyers say they arrived at special counsel Jack Smith's office this morning. The panel could make a decision on an indictment as soon as this afternoon. Some of the charges Trump could face include conspiracy and obstruction. Last week, the former president lashed out against the special counsel's investigation, calling it a disgrace, once again insisting he did nothing wrong.
CBS News investigative reporter Graham Kates joins us now to discuss what's happening. Graham, always great to have you here and on set as well. We know the target letter was sent out some time ago. What's the latest movement we're seeing right now outside the courthouse?
You know, in some ways, what we're seeing is kind of a standard development towards the end of an investigation. You're right. Just almost 2 weeks ago, Trump got another target letter for this investigation. And it's not uncommon for potential defendants' attorneys to want to meet with the prosecutors as like a last-minute stab at trying to avoid charges. It doesn't happen every time, but we did see this happen before the Mar-a-Lago documents special counsel case, where Trump's then attorneys met with Jack Smith's office and tried to keep it from happening. And it looks like roughly that's what's happening right now. We don't know if an indictment's coming soon, exactly when. But again, these are kind of these last stage moments before indictments often.
We don't know exactly when. I'm wondering if you can give us a time frame, and also wondering, now that the former president has received this target letter, is it a foregone conclusion? I mean, all but a foregone conclusion that he will, in fact, receive an indictment?
It means that it's not unlikely, right? I mean, usually you wouldn't normally tell someone they're the target of the investigation. Again, usually a final step before an indictment, if you weren't very seriously considering bringing charges. And then this meeting that often happens is, again, often this last-minute attempt to try to prevent it from happening. And it's not something like where it's often successful. It's just, you know, kind of throwing everything you can against a case, because once it's filed, it's not like there's really no going back from that. Once he's charged, he's charged. So this is, again, these meetings are an attempt to keep that from happening.
And we should remind viewers, this is related to the January 6th investigations, efforts to overturn the results of the election. But there are other cases as well Trump has faced. He's already faced indictments. His political support doesn't seem to have waned. He is still the Republican frontrunner. What might be the risk once this indictment, if it does come down, what might that be to his political future?
You know, there's a real difference in this case versus the other two. So in New York, he was charged with falsification of business records. That was a state case. It was felony charges. But again, it was just him. In the previous special counsel case, he was charged with willful retention of national security information, and that was him and an aide, Walt Nada. But this is, but it appears to be kind of a sprawling case, so you might see him and multiple other people charged. And it's a case that really looks at one of the most shocking moments in recent American history, when that mob went into the Capitol, right? And they're looking at what was the kind of the strategy before that? Did he know that the election was lost when he was claiming the election wasn't lost? Right. So these are kind of, in terms of American history, kind of pretty impactful, important things that they're looking at here.
So you say this is the big one?
Well, no,
I would never not say that.
I would never say there's one big one, right? If a former president gets convicted of a crime, of any crime, that's a really big deal. But in terms of the expansive, in terms of an expansive scope, this wasn't looking at the New York State case was repayments for reimbursements for one payment to a person. The documents case was about whether he unlawfully kept documents, right? But this is a kind of a broad scope. We've seen officials from Arizona and former officials from Georgia, and this kind of wide-ranging investigation. It's kind of just a bigger task that they've tried to tackle, kind of quickly too.
All right, Graham Kates, we know you're going to stay on standby. You're going to be here with us all day as we continue to see if this indictment does, in fact, come down today. Thanks.
Thank you.
And for more on a possible Trump indictment, Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa joins us now. Robert, what impact might this indictment have on the way GOP voters view former President Trump's bid for the presidency? We've seen in the past all the things that in conventional wisdom may have derailed a candidate's bid for the presidency seem to only add firepower to the former president, and especially with his base. How might today play out if he does, in fact, get indicted?
Good to be with you all. Inside the rival campaigns running against Trump, there's a sense that this won't, at the current moment, rattle Trump's grip over the Republican base and his coalition that has sustained him now for nearly a decade in American politics. But there's also an expectation that, as Graham Kates said, this might be a bit different than previous indictments against Trump. Unlike the classified records case and what happened in New York, this is something that could be a sweeping indictment about a criminal conspiracy against the United States. And the gravity of these possible charges could weigh on Trump, not necessarily today, but politically on his shoulders over the coming months. And maybe it doesn't force Republican voters to move away from Trump or their like of Trump or even their support of Trump, but they might begin to listen out and hear out some of the alternative candidates. And that's what those contenders really want.
At this moment, Bob, we understand the president is at his Bedminster, New Jersey
The former
home.
president.
Former president,
Yes.
excuse me, yeah. But he is expected to be in Iowa tomorrow. What are we expecting from his visit to the Hawkeye State? And I'm wondering if it will be like other visits. He kind of seems to hit the same notes he's always hit, that these are all witch hunts against him and that voters should, continue to support him.
He will likely respond to whatever happens today in Washington, but at the same time, so much of the Trump campaign right now in Iowa is about underscoring his record to religious conservatives in that state ahead of the caucuses next year. There's a belief that his support among that very influential demographic in Iowa could erode at some point if they're not convinced that he's going to be their standard bearer in the best possible way. So you can expect him to talk about overhauling the federal judiciary, nominating Supreme Court justices who are conservative, who overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. And this is about Trump trying to get that early bounce in the Republican presidential race so he can go into further contests with some political electricity behind him.
Well, on that same note, Robert, Florida Governor DeSantis is on the trail in Iowa today. He's in the middle of a campaign reset. What's his strategy for trying to win the Hawkeye State?
It's a difficult moment for Governor DeSantis because so much of a presidential campaign is not just about the message you want, it's about how you react to the message in the news. And the message in the news right now is, of course, Donald Trump and his legal challenges. DeSantis is somewhat out of the mix. He is being cast as someone who's struggling to keep his campaign staff together. He's had to shed personnel due to fundraising issues. And now he's running more of a shoestring campaign, still a major player inside the Republican Party. His allies say he can come back. But look for him to try to generate some traction, if not against Trump personally or politically, at least to try to refocus his message to some key points about his record in Florida.
All right, Robert Costa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you can stream America Decides at 5 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News.